The Galactic Command Chamber was filled with light and sound. Delegates of many species crowded the vast hall, their voices rising and falling like waves of noise. Holographic maps hung in the air, glowing with the image of a blue and green world, Earth. For years, the humans had grown stronger. Their ships had spread through the nearby sectors, their colonies had taken root on harsh worlds, and their science had advanced quickly. Some saw this as progress. Others saw it as danger. That day, the arguments ended. The council voted. The decision was clear: Earth would be invaded. Humanity would be broken before it grew too strong. The Syrians, tall and scaled, were the first to cheer. The humans are bold in words, but soft in spirit, one of their generals said. They will bend quickly. The Thalrians, sharp-eyed and cruel, smirked as they leaned back in their seats. They are diplomats, not warriors. They argue and they talk. They have never faced true power. A single wave of our fleets will bring them to their knees. Laughter moved through the chamber like a current. Many voices joined in, calling the humans reckless, calling them children. To the council, the humans were little more than newcomers, brave, but fragile. At the center of the chamber, Jonathan Hale sat in silence. He did not rise at first. His dark eyes studied the faces around him. At his side, Emma Clark sat with her hands folded, her expression calm but watchful. David Mercer leaned forward, his jaw tight, but he too said nothing. Only when the noise began to fade did Jonathan stand. His voice, when it came, was not loud. But it carried. It always carried. You speak as though Earth is a prize to be taken, Jonathan said. You laugh at the name that others have given our home, Class 15 Deathworld. You call it pride. You call it arrogance. But I tell you this, you do not understand what you are walking into. The chamber stilled for a heartbeat, caught by the weight in his words. Jonathan did not shout, and he did not threaten. He spoke with calm certainty, as though he were describing the rising of a tide. Emma's eyes swept the chamber, meeting the gaze of several delegates. David folded his arms, silent but steady, his presence like stone. Then the silence broke, and laughter returned. A veterinary delegate, tall and robed in silver, waved a hand. Deathworld, they call it. A story humans tell to make themselves seem fierce. We have heard this many times before. But a world is a world. It can be taken, and it can be ruled. Another delegate joined in, her voice sharp with scorn. If your world is so dangerous, then you should be grateful. The council will bring order. We will tame it for you. The laughter spread, rolling across the chamber. Jonathan stood quietly, his face unreadable. When at last the noise began to fade, he gave only one final look at the hall. You will learn, he said softly. And with that, he turned and walked away. Emma and David followed him, their footsteps echoing against the polished floor. None of them looked back. Behind them, the laughter swelled once more. But beneath it was something else, something quieter, a note of unease, faint but real. For those who had listened closely, Jonathan's words had not sounded like a warning. They had sounded like a promise. Far above, in orbit around the chamber's world, fleets were already preparing. Massive ships stretched out in formation, engines burning with light. Commanders barked orders, their voices sharp with pride. The Syrians polished their weapons and prepared their war chants. The Thalrians plotted their swift campaign, marking Earth cities as targets. The Vettari assembled their supply lines, already counting the resources they would strip from the blue planet. In their minds, Earth would fall within days. Perhaps a week. The humans might resist for a short while, but resistance would be crushed. After all, what could one young species do against the combined fleets of the Council? In their minds, victory was already theirs. But on Earth, the skies were clear and quiet. Jonathan's words had already been sent back to his people. Emma and David had spoken in hushed voices to leaders across the oceans, their messages swift and careful. Preparations had begun, not with noise and boasting, but with silence. The humans knew what was coming. They had always known it might come. And they would be ready. The alien fleets descended, proud and confident, their shadows falling across the stars. They came expecting surrender. They came expecting weakness. They did not understand. Earth was not just a world. Earth was a crucible, a place that had shaped humanity with storms, with fire, with predators, with hunger, with endless struggle. A place where survival was not given but earned every single day. And those who came to take it would learn why the galaxy had named it a Deathworld. The alien fleets broke through Earth's skies with blazing engines, their banners shining across the void. Commanders stood proudly on their bridges, speaking of swift victory and short campaigns. Their soldiers, drilled and armored, stepped down onto Earth's soil with the confidence of conquerors. But Earth did not bow. The first breath of air burned their lungs. What had seemed like a simple oxygen atmosphere was thick, damp, and heavy with invisible life. Spores clung to their armor. Tiny particles invaded their suits, clogging filters and spreading strange fevers. What the humans had learned to live with from birth now gnawed at the invaders with cruel patience. The second shock was gravity. On their home worlds, they walked with ease, their strides graceful and strong. But Earth pulled at them harder, pressing down on their backs, dragging at their steps. Soldiers who had once trained for war could barely march in formation. Their limbs ached, their lungs strained, and the proud ranks wavered. The third shock came from the world itself. Storms rose without warning. Skies that looked clear split with thunder, and rain fell in sheets so heavy it blinded their senses. Camps were torn apart in the night, tents ripped to shreds, equipment scattered into mud. Rivers swelled and swallowed supply lines. The land itself seemed alive, eager to break the invaders before the humans even fired a shot. And then came the living world. Insects swarmed in numbers the soldiers had never seen. Tiny wings carried stings that pierced through armor joints, burning skin with venom. Creatures in the forest stalked them with glowing eyes, waiting until darkness fell to strike. In the grasslands, predators tested the edges of their patrols, ripping apart the careless. The invaders fired their weapons in panic, but the beasts kept coming, bold and unafraid. What they had thought was prey was instead a land of hunters. But the greatest shock was not the storms or the creatures. It was the humans. The first attack came at dawn. Alien soldiers moved in long lines across a field, their commanders shouting orders. The grass bent under their heavy steps, their weapons ready to strike any resistance. For a moment, the field seemed empty. Then the skies roared. Human fighters dropped from the clouds with deadly speed, their movements sharp and precise. Missiles streaked through the air, tearing apart the alien columns. Before the soldiers could regroup, the fighters were gone, vanishing back into the clouds as if swallowed by the storm. In the forests, it was worse. Alien patrols walked with their scanners humming, their weapons pointed into the shadows. But the shadows moved. Human soldiers slipped through the trees like smoke. They knew the terrain, every path, every route, every sound. Shots cracked in the distance, and soldiers fell one by one, never seeing where the attack had come from. When the patrols turned to fight back, there was only silence. In the cities, the humans struck like ghosts. Streets that seemed empty suddenly lit with fire from windows above. Armored vehicles rolled into squares, only to vanish in fire as hidden charges tore them apart. Snipers waited patiently, their shots picking off officers with cold precision. The invaders, proud in their numbers, found themselves surrounded by shadows they could never catch. And at sea, the humans revealed their cunning. Fleets of alien warships moved across the oceans, ready to crush any resistance. But storms drove them into confusion, waves higher than mountains throwing them off course. Submarines slipped beneath them unseen, releasing torpedoes that struck like lightning from the depths. Ships burned and sank, swallowed by Earth's waters. Survivors floated in terror as the waves dragged them down. The alien commanders tried to rally their forces. They sent messages back to the Council, calling for reinforcements, for answers, for anything. But their reports were scattered and broken. This world resists. Our soldiers are sick. The air burns them. We cannot hold position. Predators, they come even into the camps. And then silence. On Earth, the invaders began to feel fear. They had arrived believing the war would be short, that humans would bow quickly. Instead, they found themselves hunted at every turn. At night, soldiers huddled in their camps, their weapons held tight, their eyes darting to the shadows beyond the firelight. They spoke in whispers, their voices shaking. They jumped at every sound, the crack of a branch, the howl of a distant animal, the whistle of the wind. For in the darkness, the humans were always there. Every day brought another loss. A patrol never returned. A ship vanished from orbit. A supply convoy was ambushed and destroyed. Officers disappeared in the night. Each loss was precise, chosen, deliberate. The humans were not fighting like the Council expected. They were not standing in lines, waiting to be crushed by superior numbers. They were fighting like their world itself, harsh, patient, and merciless. Ambassador Jonathan Hale had warned them. His voice had been calm, steady, and ignored. Now his words echoed in the minds of the commanders who struggled to hold their positions. You do not understand what you are walking into. The commanders began to understand. They understood when their soldiers fell sick from simple water, while humans drank it without fear. They understood when storms scattered their fleets while humans flew through the skies with ease. They understood when forests swallowed their armies whole, and humans struck from every shadow. The Council had promised victory. The Council had promised that Earth would fall in days. But days turned to weeks, and victory did not come. Instead, fear came. The alien soldiers, once proud and loud, now walked with their heads low. Their steps dragged, their weapons shook in their hands. They had come to conquer, but now they only hoped to survive the night. And the humans gave them no rest. In the skies, in the forests, in the cities, and in the seas, humanity fought with the fury of a world that had forged them in fire. They were not playing by the Council's rules. They were not waiting to be saved. Earth itself fought beside them, and every storm, every shadow, every living thing seemed to join in the defense. What was promised to be easy had become a nightmare. And the nightmare had only begun. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in bunkers carved into stone, Jonathan Hale studied maps lit with glowing red marks. Emma Clark stood at his side, her eyes fixed on the patterns of enemy movement. David Mercer leaned against the wall, his silence heavy, his thoughts focused. Reports flowed in from every corner of the planet. Invader fleets hung broken in orbit. Alien ground troops were scattered, their supplies dwindling, their morale sinking. But Jonathan did not smile. His voice remained calm, his orders steady. "Push the line here," he said, pointing at a narrow valley. "Strike their supply run here. Keep them moving. Do not let them rest." Emma relayed the commands with precision. Her words carried across networks, reaching pilots, soldiers, and captains. And across Earth, humanity moved as one. The skies burned first. Human fleets rose from the surface, sleek ships hidden for years in underground hangars and ocean caverns. They climbed into orbit with trails of fire, their weapons already hot. Satellites that had circled Earth quietly for decades woke, revealing their hidden teeth. Railguns thundered, sending rods of metal tearing through alien hulls. Missiles launched in great waves, weaving through the void with deadly accuracy. Alien fleets tried to regroup, but the humans struck like hawks. Every formation they built collapsed under relentless fire. Battles that once favored the invaders now broke apart, their ships scattered and retreating into shadows. On the ground, the fight was even fiercer. In the mountains, human fighters knew every path, every rock, every hidden cave. Alien soldiers, heavy in their armor, struggled to climb the steep slopes. Snipers watched them from high cliffs, each shot breaking their lines and sending fear through their ranks. In the forests, shadows moved. Human units slipped through trees in silence, their steps practiced, their patience endless. They struck fast and vanished before the invaders could respond. Trails of smoke marked ambushes where entire patrols were erased in seconds. In the cities, the fight turned every street into a fortress. Soldiers held rooftops, alleys, and basements, making every corner a trap. Tanks rolled down roads, only to be struck from above, below, and all sides. Bridges fell in fire. Highways were cut off. The invaders could not move without paying in blood. Every hill, every river, every street was human ground. And the humans fought with discipline, not rage. They were not wild, uncontrolled. Their strikes were measured, their attacks chosen with care. They wasted no energy. Every bullet had a purpose. Every missile found its mark. Every decision was tied to survival and victory. Jonathan's command centers became the heart of this resistance. He never raised his voice, never panicked. His orders were clear, sharp, and calm. Emma's coordination kept the chaos controlled, her voice steady as she directed fleets and soldiers alike. David spoke rarely, but when he did, his words carried weight, reminding everyone of what was at stake. "They came here to conquer us," he said once, his tone low but strong. "Instead, they will learn what Earth truly is." And Earth showed them. Alien troops discovered that rivers could turn into walls, swollen by sudden rains that swept away their camps. Hills that seemed empty hid artillery waiting to fire. Cities that looked abandoned swallowed them whole. Even the deserts, dry and harsh, hid soldiers who struck like ghosts and vanished into the sand. The invaders had believed they were fighting a planet of soft diplomats. Instead, they were fighting warriors shaped by a world of storms, predators, and endless challenges. Rumors began to spread among the alien ranks. Soldiers whispered that Earth itself fought against them. They spoke of skies that hated them, of forests that moved, of oceans that swallowed ships whole. And always, they spoke of the humans, fighters who appeared from nowhere, struck with merciless skill, and disappeared before they could be caught. Above the battlefields, alien commanders tried to hold their fleets together. They sent desperate messages to the Council, calling for reinforcements, for rescue, for answers. But many of their pleas were cut off mid-sentence, silenced by explosions and fire. One by one, their command centers fell. Missiles struck from orbit. Strike teams broke through defenses and planted charges. Leaders who had once mocked humanity now found themselves running, hiding, or vanishing altogether. The Council, far away, began to hear whispers from their own fleets. Whispers of fear. Whispers of failure. Whispers that humanity was not breaking, but rising. In the hidden bunkers, Jonathan, Emma, and David received those reports too. But they did not celebrate. Their eyes remained sharp, their work unending. "This is not victory yet," Jonathan said. "This is survival. We must keep pressing." And humanity pressed. Where once alien ships filled the skies, now human fighters roared with confidence. Where once foreign armies marched across fields, now they stumbled, broken and hunted. Where once commanders promised easy conquest, now they faced nothing but endless defeat. The rumors spread faster than the fleets. Across the stars, traders whispered in fear. Colonies sent quiet messages to one another. Delegates in the council chamber no longer laughed at Jonathan Hale's warnings. They remembered his calm words, his steady voice, and realized he had not been boasting. He had been promising. Earth had not fallen. Earth had risen. And the invasion was being torn apart, piece by piece. The galaxy began to understand the truth. Humanity was not just defending their world. They were teaching a lesson, one strike at a time. The lesson was simple. On Earth, humans were never the prey. They were always the hunters. The collapse did not happen all at once. It came in waves, each one heavier than the last. In orbit above Earth, alien fleets once proud and united now floated broken. Ships that had come with confidence now drifted as ruins, their lights gone, their signals silent. Some commanders still tried to rally their forces, shouting orders across failing networks, but their words reached no one. Their fleets were already scattered. On the ground, the story was the same. Invader soldiers, who had once marched boldly through human cities, now crouched in ruins, waiting for attacks they could not stop. Supply lines had been cut. Ammunition was low. Food and water were almost gone. Many abandoned their posts in the night, hoping to escape into the forests or mountains, but the forests and mountains belonged to the humans. Few ever returned. Commanders sent desperate calls to the council. "We need reinforcements. Our fleets are burning. Our armies cannot hold." But the messages carried no hope. They ended in silence, cut short by explosions or ambushes. Every report that reached the Galactic Council carried the same truth: defeat. In the chamber, silence replaced laughter. Where once voices had shouted with pride, now they whispered in fear. Delegates who had once mocked humanity sat pale, their faces showing disbelief. The Syrians no longer hissed in arrogance. The Thaurians did not smirk. Even the Vettari, who had once spoken with cold certainty, lowered their eyes to the floor. The chamber doors opened. Emma Clark stepped forward. Her calm presence carried weight heavier than any army. David Mercer followed, silent as always, but the look in his eyes told the council everything. Moments later, Jonathan Hale entered. They did not speak at first. The silence itself pressed down on the room, heavy, suffocating. Delegates shifted in their seats, waiting for words, but none came. It was Emma who finally broke the quiet. Her voice was steady, simple, but sharper than any blade. "You thought survival was weakness. You were wrong." The words cut through the chamber, leaving no room for reply. Some delegates tried to speak, their mouths opening, but no sound came. The truth was too heavy. Reports continued to arrive, each one worse than the last. Alien commanders were not asking for victory anymore. They were begging for retreat. Ships that had once sworn never to surrender now turned and fled at the first sign of human fleets. Outposts went dark without a fight, their soldiers abandoning everything in their panic to escape. The galaxy began to whisper a new fear. The invasion of Earth had not only failed, it had destroyed the pride of entire species. For the humans, this was not cruelty. It was not revenge. It was survival, pure and simple. Jonathan, Emma, and David did not smile at the reports. They did not boast. Their faces remained calm, their words measured. But the council could feel it, the humans were no longer playing the same game. One delegate, voice trembling, asked, "Will they stop?" Jonathan Hale raised his eyes. His calm stare moved across the chamber. He did not raise his voice, yet every word carried like thunder. Earth did not choose this war. You brought it to us. And now you learn what it means to challenge a world that was never meant to be tamed. The delegates shifted again, some unable to meet his gaze. They had laughed when he had warned them. They had ignored every sign, every lesson. Now their fleets were scattered, their soldiers broken, their pride shattered. Outside the chamber, the collapse continued. Human fleets moved with precision, striking every stronghold that remained. They did not waste energy on civilians or worlds outside the war. Their focus was sharp, their strikes exact. Every move carried purpose. Invader armies who once shouted promises of conquest now whispered only of escape. Many left their weapons behind, running from a world that never let them rest. Some begged for mercy. Others vanished in the forests, only to find that even the land itself seemed against them. The council had no answers. They had no defenses against the truth spreading across the stars. Earth had survived, and those who had dared to invade were collapsing in shame and fear. In every corner of the galaxy, leaders whispered the same words to their people. Do not provoke Earth. The lesson was spreading faster than any fleet. Jonathan Hale, Emma Clark, and David Mercer stood at the center of it all. They did not raise their voices. They did not make threats. They simply stood, silent but unshakable, while the council realized how wrong they had been. The collapse of the invaders was not just a defeat on a battlefield. It was the breaking of pride, the shattering of arrogance, the ending of a false belief. The belief that Earth was weak. The belief that restraint was fear. The belief that humans would bow to greater powers. That belief was gone. And in its place was something far more dangerous, respect, sharpened by fear. The chamber remained silent long after Emma's words. No delegate dared to argue. No one dared to laugh. The silence itself was the answer, heavier than war, sharper than any threat. The collapse of the invaders was complete. And the galaxy finally began to understand what it truly meant to call Earth a Deathworld. The invasion was over. What had begun with pride and laughter had ended in silence and ruin. Alien fleets that once filled Earth's skies were now nothing but wreckage drifting in orbit, cold and broken. Commanders who had once promised victory now stood in disgrace, their names whispered with shame. Soldiers who had marched with confidence now laid down their weapons, their faces pale with fear. Many did not even resist capture. They were too tired, too broken, too shaken by what they had faced. Every survivor carried the same question, whispered again and again. How could we invade a Class 15 Deathworld? It was no longer a joke. When the words had first been spoken, many had laughed. To them, the idea of Class 15 had been nothing but human exaggeration, a trick to frighten the weak. Now, those same words echoed like a curse, one that followed them wherever they went. In the council chamber, no one dared to speak loudly. The grand hall that had once roared with mocking voices now stood heavy with silence. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, avoiding one another's eyes. They had watched the invasion begin with arrogance. Now they watched its ending with fear. Jonathan Hale entered the chamber with Emma Clark and David Mercer at his side. Their steps were steady, their faces calm. They did not need to raise their voices. Their presence alone silenced the chamber. Jonathan looked at the delegates, his gaze steady and sharp. But he did not boast. He did not demand tribute. He did not call for revenge. He spoke only once. You thought Earth was weak. You thought survival meant fear. You were wrong. The words hung in the air like iron. No one dared to reply. Emma and David stood beside him, silent, watchful. They did not smile, but the quiet in their eyes was more powerful than any weapon. The council could feel it, humanity did not need to shout. They had already spoken with action, and the lesson was carved deep into every species' memory. The humans turned and walked away. They did not threaten. They did not bargain. They simply left the chamber, calm and silent. That silence said more than any speech ever could. Across the galaxy, the lesson spread. Fleets that had once thought of testing Earth now stayed far from its borders. Merchants avoided even the edge of human space, whispering warnings to one another. Leaders taught their young not to provoke humans. Generals told their soldiers never to underestimate them. The story spread faster than light. It was told in trading stations, in military academies, in the quiet homes of distant colonies. Some told it with awe, others with fear. But the message was always the same. Never provoke Earth. Generations passed, but the memory did not fade. Children of species who had not even been alive during the invasion still learned the tale. Teachers spoke of the Deathworld with solemn voices. Soldiers preparing for battle were warned never to forget what had happened when humanity was pushed too far. The story grew into something larger than war. It became legend. They called it the day the galaxy learned its doom. Not the doom of destruction, but the doom of arrogance. It was the day proud species discovered that restraint was not weakness, that patience was not fear, and that humanity, quiet, watchful humanity, was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Some whispered that Earth had gone back to its old ways, living in peace, building cities, raising families. But even then, no one dared to test them again. The lesson had been burned too deeply into memory. Emma Clark, David Mercer, and Jonathan Hale's names became part of the legend too. They were remembered not as conquerors, but as the faces of a truth no one could forget. Calm, steady, and silent, they had stood before the council and shown that words were not needed when actions had already spoken. In time, the council rebuilt itself. New delegates came, younger and less proud. But even they knew the story. Even they whispered it when talk of war grew too loud. It was a reminder, a warning, a shadow that never left the chamber. And so the galaxy carried the memory forward. The day they invaded a Deathworld, the story always began. The day they thought Earth was weak. The day they learned their doom. It was a story told in silence as much as in words, a story written not in books but in fear, in respect, and in the ruins of fleets that had once believed themselves invincible. The invasion ended in ruin, but the lesson remained forever. Never provoke Earth.